Hello there again, and welcome back to my channel. Today I am still working on my Inktober project, and I already have a little bit of sketching done for this one. It's going to be a full page and I can already tell it's going to take me a very long time. So I'm going to show you what I'm going to be attempting to recreate. This is from, I think I had the date on here somewhere, don't remember, but this was from my 100-day project in 2023. I think it was the 16th of April. So this is April of 2023. I did this one and I loved it so much. There's so much going on here when I did this one, and I really do like it, but I recall it took me such a long time to do this. But I'm going to do my best to just show this, and I am going to show you quite a bit of this work in time lapse. But let me just go ahead and show you now that you've kind of glimpsed at what this one was. Let me scoot this aside. And here is the sketch I have right now. Is you can see a few of some very similar elements. There's going to be a lot of layering heading inward towards this kind of hole, like a tunnel heading in that direction. So like I said, I am going to speed this up, and there will be a little bit of commentary here and there. So let's see how this goes, because I can already tell this is going to take me hours to do. So in order to show that to you in a nice timely fashion, I'm going to speed it up a little bit. So here we go. So what you're going to notice right away is that I actually ended up speeding this a bit more than I was hoping to. But hey, that's how things go. I did work on this for about 4 hours. So I hope that you can appreciate just everything that goes into this one. It was quite a few hours. It is a bit late tonight, but you know what? I love doing this. If I'm going to spend my evening doing anything, it's gonna have to be this. So, you know, I'm not complaining. I do enjoy this. There's a reason why I wanted to do Inktober. But as you can see here, I basically just started working in the upper right hand corner. It's just started adding the simplest shapes for me are these kind of spirals. They kind of fill in the corners really nicely. So that's where I started. As I mentioned earlier, the idea is that I will kind of start from the edges, or from the corners in particular, and that I will work my way inward. And so that's what this is I'm starting on these edges with just a few designs. You'll see I moved to that lower corner now, because it's really just hard to layer things if I start anywhere else, really, if I'm going to create the effect that I want. So I start with these elements on the outer edges, kind of in the corners. For this one here, you saw that I did a few pencil marks there just to kind of outline where I wanted this to be. And now as I'm adding the ink, I'm not just using the exact same shapes that I have there. I'm trying to make this thing that looks kind of like it's tattered, like it's got a bunch of holes in it, kind of. But I am making sure that as I go through there, because my first sketch, you know, with the pencil, they were these little sort of just round shapes, but as I go in with the ink, I am adjusting them. I'm changing them more to be a little more natural looking, more organic, rather than just being circles. And so I am changing the shapes right there. So you'll see that as I go through and add the ink for those, that I do change it and adjust it a little bit. It is still possible that I will add or take away from the pattern there, but right now this is kind of just a good foundation. I feel like with a lot of these, I always change something later, and that's okay. I think that it's just important to lay down some major elements and just kind of be able to look at those for a while. So you'll see that right now I'm adding these kind of lines that are just heading outward from the corner. And the main thing I'm just trying to do is that at their base, I'm making sure that those lines are just a little thicker. It helps make it look like there's kind of a shadow there, just a little darker. It's just one of my things that I like to do personally. So I just go through and do that with all of them. And then some of the lines do branch out a little bit. I think that helps too. So that way it fills it out. I am going to do some shading there later. I just don't think I have the time for it now. It will probably happen much later. So now I go into this area right here, and I'm going to try out this pattern that I actually haven't used in a hot second What it is I started with these sort of branching shapes, but instead of the branching kind of pointed outwards, it points inward. And so you'll see what I do is I just start filling it in with these curved lines. And it doesn't feel terribly intuitive at first, but you'll start to see what it kind of looks like. I feel like it's a bit like muscle tissue. It looks really, really interesting. And I wanted to make sure to have a little segment of that in here. I did like that a lot from the previous drawing. So I did want to use that here again. So there you see, I'm trying to just kind of make all these nice curved lines. And then out towards the outer edge, there are just these little lines that kind of just go to nowhere, basically. I tend to do that on the edges just a lot so that it looks like it's kind of fading out, kind of. So I'll add a little bit more there, just another branch. So right there, you'll see wherever I make it look darker, it's because I'm doing that in the places where the patterns kind of look like they're overlapping. And heading outward, I try to fade it out. At least when I do that, I really like the outcome. I think that's why I just keep following that trend for these. So there we go. Just a few that I finished up with right there. So that turned out pretty good. And then I just go through and I continue this sort of tattered look. I do end up using that kind of edge on a whole lot of things in this drawing. I think I really wanted to use that one over and over again. So you will end up seeing that on quite a few of these. Which I think made it look really nice. You will see it as it kind of progresses here. So for this section, I came back to the pencil again. It helps so much, especially when it comes to these things that need to be, at least in my mind, I want them to be pointed in a certain direction. I don't want to risk having them pointed in kind of random angles. So the pencil is very, very helpful. I really wanted these to kind of spray out towards a certain area, and so just kind of doing this helped a lot. So there you go. These almost look like really long petals almost. That's essentially what I'm doing here. So you'll see they're just these long bars, and the ends are rounded off, almost like really, really long petals. And this one, at this point, I really only do the inking, and I will likely do more. I will add more shading with ink. At this point, I just kind of move on. As I mentioned earlier, this already took so many hours. And so I'm going to leave some of the finer details for later. That's what I'm going to do. And for now, I'm just laying down the major line work. And then that's the last one right there. So there we go. I just made sure that some of the lines were a little thicker just to kind of imply that kind of shading there. And I think it looks okay like this. It looks pretty good. So this is what it looks like. And so there's that section, and you see I added a few of these little shapes there, just little circles. It's always nice to have little details like that, just to kind of break it up. And then if you know me and you know the way that I draw, I like to add these bolder lines, and it really helps to separate the different designs. So I'm just doing that right here, just adding a bolder line along the edges. And then I go back to the pencil for this part. You'll see me using that a lot, actually. And then before I do that, I just end up going to the other corner, kind of working on that design there. Some nice spirals and some circles. It's always a nice way to kind of take care of some of those areas. And then there's a few little tendrils there. I did like the way that turned out in some of the previous drawings, so you'll notice that was something that kind of carried through. I think it's really interesting that way. just seeing the kind of things that I do in those, and then just what ends up being successful for me, at least. What kind of shapes or designs I end up liking. So I did like that one, and so I'm using it again here again. I think this is the third drawing I do that in, where I kind of create a frame and have these sort of tendrils spilling out over the edge of the frame. I think it looks nice. So I used it again here. So for this one, I do end up leaving it like that. I do have an idea of some ways that I want to add a bit more detail to that one, but at this point in the drawing, I haven't made that decision yet. So you will notice I end up leaving that alone. Sometimes it's okay to just leave it be, kind of let it rest for a while. I'm thinking that for any of these drawings that I am not able to finish right now, at the very least they'll be mostly complete. So maybe after Inktober is over, I will go back and maybe add a little more or clean them up or do anything like that I need to do before I put the whole thing together. Yeah. So at this point, that section that I had made a little border for, I'm filling it with these little designs. I think of them like little rainbows almost. They're just 3 little arches. That's all it is. 3 little arches. And in that innermost spot, I just fill it in with ink. It's such a simple design. It really is. You layer them almost like fish scales, or like mermaid scales, if you want to think of it that way. That's the simple way I think about it. And they fill in a space really nicely. So you can see I just keep going here. I just kind of stack them up on top of each other. I alternate. And that's all it is. It's just 3 little arches each time. You could probably do more. Could probably add more, maybe like 4. I thought about it, but I realized that just because of the compact space that I was putting this pattern in, I didn't want to make any designs that would take up too much space, essentially, is what I was thinking. So just 3 little arches was all I took for these teeny tiny rainbows, or these little maybe mermaid scales, maybe like that. Of course, it's much more involved, but I think it turned out pretty good. One thing that I had to keep reminding myself of was that I couldn't work in certain areas until I laid down a foundation. So right here, I can just stack them. That's fine. I have my foundation. But as I kind of work towards the right, I have to lay down those first few little tiny shapes right on the edge there. Yeah, you can only work up. There's only one way to work it up. Start at the base and just work heading up. Or I guess in this case, not the literal up, but just kind of towards the center there. It's just nice. I do know that I have a few variations of this that are a little different. A couple of other patterns that are very similar to this, but I think for this one was the best one. It's simpler, and I am going to add some shading, either with the pencil, or I may actually be tempted to shade and color this one digitally. I haven't decided on that yet, though. I'm still not sure. So there, I'm just going to keep adding those. I'm almost reaching the edge. When I get to the edge there, where that pencil mark is, I don't exactly fill it perfectly. I do leave these little gaps up at the top that I suppose I could put more shapes in, but I think I really like it more when the edges are, I suppose, a little more jagged. Makes it look a little more interesting. For me, at least. I think it looks interesting. And so as I work my way up to that pencil line, I make sure that I don't fill it in perfectly. I leave all those little gaps. And so as I add those last few there, you can see. I even add a few in a few spots just to make it even more jagged, just so that it's a little bit outside of the line. It's nice to work outside the line. And then as usual, I add my bold line. It's very, very helpful. And in a way, I know that I add this bold line specifically for me, to assist me, essentially, just because I do wear glasses. My vision isn't exactly the best, so I think that having those denser lines, those heavier lines, really helps me. So for this next part, I'm trying out something a little more interesting. I'm sketching these kind of branches. And I did end up having a couple of them, and now that I have them in place, I'll just go in and ink them, and you'll see really quickly kind of how it works up. And it is some more of that kind of tattered look, but instead of just being sort of like a tattered fabric. I added all these branches, but I was hoping that they look more like tree roots, and I think they do. I think it looks okay. Although it doesn't have to look like anything in particular. I just wanted something that would kind of stick out like that, and it looks pretty good. It's going to be interesting shading that in or coloring it in. Let's see what happens. And so now that that's there, because I had a hard time deciding on what kind of pattern to put in there, I decided to just add all these sort of simple hatch marks, just in a single direction. I know I have a tendency to call them little eyelashes. So I'm really just flicking my pen to just get all these lines in there, heading out from the line from the previous design. It's kind of just making some, like a deep shadow right there. That's all it's doing. So that's how that looks. I'll go back to adding that kind of bold line there. It's pretty good stuff. Just like that. And I think at this point I ended up taking a break. I did walk away from this drawing a handful of times throughout the evening to go do other things, and then I would just come back to it. I didn't really expect to spend so much time on it. I knew it was going to take a while, but oh my gosh, every time I do it to myself. And this is pretty standard for me. So I suppose that at this point, since I am talking about that, if you're drawing, or if you're trying to see kind of what I'm drawing to see if you can get any inspiration, first of all, thank you so much. I'm glad that you are here and you're checking out my drawings. It's an honor, really. I had no idea. I never really thought that anyone would want to see the kind of things that I would draw. So first of all, thank you. And also, I hope that you realize that everyone has their own creative process. Everyone has their own speed, their own pace. And of course, obviously, I don't draw this fast because this is sped up. I think I sped it up about 5x. So it's going by pretty fast. But still, for me to be able to set aside the time in one evening to draw this much is just something I do. It's a habit that I've developed because I want to, because I have the time, because I have the desire, because I have the ability, and it's nothing that I hope stresses anyone out. And I do say that, maybe it isn't exactly the right words, but I do mean that I hope there isn't anyone or any of you out there thinking that, oh, you're horrible at what you do because you're watching what I do and you're thinking, look at how much drawing this person does. No. I think everybody's going to be at their own place, their own stage. It's your journey, it's your artwork, And maybe drawing isn't the thing you get the most joy out of. Maybe it ends up being something else. Perhaps watercolors are your thing, or maybe just drawing with a pencil is what will bring you the most joy. And I'm hoping that by sharing my drawings at least, or this process, even when a drawing takes me 4 hours or more possibly, I hope that when you see this, that you see that I get so much joy out of it. That this is my happy place. This is where I'm happy to spend hours and hours just exploring and playing around. This is it. And I hope you find yours too. I hope you find your happy place. I hope you find that art form that just, as they say, it gets you up in the morning. It gets you going. You can get up, get your coffee, do whatever you need to do, and then go grab your piece of paper, go grab your pens, or your paint brushes, or whatever it is. Go grab a crochet hook and have some fun and just have some joy in what you do. Yep. And so essentially this is what I do. And the crazy thing about this drawing is even with all the hours I spent on it today, it is not finished. It is only line work. I only did the line work and it took me about 4 hours. And I cherish every moment of that. Every moment I did this, I spent learning a little bit, getting slightly better, just doing a little bit more, getting a little bit farther. Just doing my best. Especially when I'm doing these little patterns like this one where it's just lots of little circles. There's just something about that just carries me away somewhere else. Just something interesting. And it's that repetition. For any of you who do this kind of thing to practice meditative, kind of having a meditative experience, that's what this is right here. It's just taking that same little shape and drawing it over and over again. And for me in particular, it's about patience. It's about practicing patience. So here it is. There's that whole segment. It was actually a pretty large area. And so at this point, I do get to move over to that other corner finally. Put in some of these little spirals here in the corner. They do look pretty nice, so I'm glad. I think it was a good way to fill those corners, and I'm really glad the way it looks. It kind of ties everything together, I think. Now, I will admit that going into that next area, that next region that I fill with the next pattern, I did have a bit of a hard time deciding how to fill it. But when I did decide eventually, you see I have this really squiggly line, which, like I said, made it hard for me to decide how to fill that pattern. So I ended up just choosing again that kind of tattered look. So what I just did was filled it with shapes and then just shaded those in black. Just filled them in with black. And I really wasn't sure if I was going to like this. I really wasn't. But as I kind of started working through there, I think it came out pretty good. At least I had already tried it out a little bit on the other side of the page, so I guess maybe I did kind of know that it was going to be alright. But hey, sometimes that's what we do. We just have to just jump right in and just try it out. At least what I try to do is if I end up with a design or a pattern somewhere that I'm not entirely happy with, I try to maybe cover it over or somehow turn it into something else. And that usually works. It's just always funny how only I see the so-called flaws. Nobody else knows. I'm the only one who knows. But that's usually a pretty easy, pretty approachable way to change the way something looks. especially because I am working with relatively abstract sort of shapes, or at least they are a little bit amorphous. They could be represented in different ways. I think because of that, it makes it a little easier for me to change some things and just make something look completely different and it still be okay. I think that's probably one of the reasons why I like to draw this way so much. I like to just play around with just these loose shapes and just kind of see what can happen. They do look a little bit like the spots on a cow, kind of. I keep wondering if there's some way that I can change these so that they kind of have a different feel to them. Yeah, so far I think they look pretty good right here. And then just filling in the last few. Sometimes it's always those last little gaps that just are the hardest to fill. And here I'm just going over the edge again, just to create that bold area. I always wonder if I get carried away at this stage. I'm always asking myself, is that too much? Is it too much? And what's funny is even though I ask myself that, it really doesn't matter because I'm going to do it anyway. I want to see how it's going to look. I want to see the result of the experiment. And so I just do it, and then I kind of ask myself the question later if it was okay or not. That's pretty much how it goes. At this point, I'm really excited because I can already see that I'm getting really, really close to those last little areas. I'm already working my way into that tunnel, and that's the most exciting part. I love that part so much. And so the good part about this area, at least when I did the last drawing, I remember that this area works up much, much faster. And so the reason for that in my mind is because the patterns can be much, much simpler. So here you're seeing me just do these lines. Just lots of little lines. And I'm trying to make them so they're kind of pointed, so they're thicker at the base and heading outward they get kind of thin. So it's a really easy design. And the reason for that is really just that these little segments are so small now. You'll see I'm working in a really small strip. And I really can't fit any big patterns in there. I just can't. So they work up really quickly. I just kind of zip my way around this here. Just making these little dashes. Because when it's that small, I just can't fit anything big in there. So keeping it simple is the best idea right now. You'll also see that when I make these lines, I'm not using the technique where you pull the pen to make like little eyelashes. I am actually very intentionally drawing a thick line and then tapering it out as I head outwards. Sometimes I like to do that better. But I only really do that in particular when I want my lines to be distinctly separate from each other, like right now. You'll see none of them are overlapping. They are very easily identifiable as single lines. And so there I just keep adding them. And as I mentioned earlier, I am going to add shading. I will definitely add some shading. I just have so many little tattered edges and so many patterns that without the shading, they all kind of, it just gets a little crazy, you know? And so that shading is really going to help separate them much, much better than what's going on right now. Although this is nice too, actually. I do enjoy these drawings even before there's shading, but I absolutely love them once I put a lot of grays in there. So I'm looking forward to that. This segment here, I kept it a little bit larger, but it was really only because I wanted to fill it in with these kind of wavy lines. These nice flowy wavy lines. So I just break it up into all these little sections and I start little bits and just kind of start filling it in. And I just follow the contour of that circle. I will admit I was so tempted to rotate the drawing, but because I knew I was going to speed up the footage, I really did not want to be turning the paper over and over and over, you know, rotating it or spinning it around. I felt that if I did that, everyone was going to end up all dizzy. So I made sure to keep it just kind of pointing one direction. I kept it upright for this part. Something else that I can say here, that I can say about this part of the drawing is that for me, when I draw these kind of tunnels, I actually call them portals, and some of you may have heard me say that before. When I draw this kind of a thing, I think of it as a portal. And it really is actually something very meaningful to me in particular in my art practice and just overall in my own sense of the universe, really. I like drawing this kind of thing, especially as I get towards this area, as I get closer and closer towards that black circle there. I start to really focus a lot on my place in the world, my place in the universe, and I just start kind of, in a way, daydreaming. It really is very zen for me. And I just love this part right here as I start really, really hyper focusing on how the shapes that I'm drawing are all pointing towards that opening. And I think that's why I was so surprised that I ended up working on this for so many hours, because especially as I got down to this area, probably in that last hour or so, I just wasn't keeping track of time anymore. I wasn't thinking about it, I wasn't thinking about it anymore. I was just here, and all I knew was that my goal was to keep drawing until I reached that black circle. That's all I was doing. And it really is, it's such a unique feeling, and some of you may be able to attest to that. Some of you may get that feeling out of it. And I can admit that in the past, sometimes just trying to finish a drawing would maybe give me some anxiety or something like that, and then I would have to set it aside because I felt like it just wasn't good. But I think that these days, when I do a drawing, especially a big one like this, I actually look forward to those long hours spent where I do all these teeny tiny details, all these little squiggly lines, all those tiny little hatch marks. All of that is truly a meditative experience for me. Every tiny shape, every little blob of ink, every line, every swirl, every one of those little things for me personally is a moment. It's a tiny little meditation is what those are. And I'm wondering kind of, I think about why I'm doing what I'm doing. Why should I keep doing what I'm doing? That's really where my mind goes. And of course there are lots of other things. That's kind of what we all do when we are in contemplation or in meditation or anything like that. Just start pondering lots of different things. And just looking at it, I'm remembering, even though it was just earlier today, by the way, it was just earlier today, it is such a nice feeling to know that this is how I spent my time. That this is what I did. That for hours I focused on this and I got it done. And it's really nice. I hope that you're enjoying this part too. Just kind of watching as the drawing grows, as the designs and the patterns just continue to evolve and just get closer and closer to completing that kind of tunnel effect, that little portal, the magical portal to another land. It's just wonderful. For me, at least, it's a wonderful feeling. And I do always love exploring different ways that I could kind of layer these designs in order to create a tunnel like this. It's so interesting. And I am so very much looking forward to showing you all the result after I've added shading. Lots and lots of shading. It's going to look very, very interesting, and I'm very much looking forward to it. So there's that layer of these little circles. I ended up extending it all the way around like that. And there is just that little bit left, and I actually decided to keep it fairly simple. So you'll see that there's just these 2 layers that remain. And for this one here, I just do those little hatch marks again. Just really simple. I just go all the way around doing those little hatch marks. It's okay to reuse some of the designs. Just kind of use them again. And so that's a nice simple way to get that one there. I think when I do the shading, it'll also change that one a little bit too. And then for just that very last region that remains, I just do these really simple kind of circular lines. Just because I know I'm getting down to the end there, I almost want to create like a smoother gradient. So I want this last little area to be just a little darker. And so I'll just do that by kind of layering those circular lines, those little squiggly lines, just a little bit. And that way it looks relatively dark. Helps it fade into the edge there. And just end up adding a little bit more. So there we go. That is basically the end of it. So much work, and I'm so happy with the outcome. And so I do want to thank you again. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you have a wonderful day, and I will see you again very, very soon with the next one. Bye.